Hello, welcome to 10 in Tech. I'm your instructor Clark, and today we're going to learn about designing timber frames using the 3D CAD program Sketchup. This is part 4 of a 5-part series where I show you how to generate a timber list for your project that you can use to estimate project costs, order timber, and keep your project organized.
Nice and slow.
An accurate timber list is important for many aspects of timber framing. As a professional, it can help you price a project, and for an owner builder, it can help you with your budget. And of course, you'll need it to order material. But it can also help you keep your project organized by creating a checklist you can use to track the progress of each piece in the frame. So here I've got a little frame that I've modeled in SketchUp, and I'm going to quickly make a timber list just to kind of show you how it works. Under Extensions, Timber Framing, just pick the timber list option. And you'll notice that it automatically starts up Microsoft Excel and fills in all these rows in a brand new spreadsheet for you. Now, auto-populating an Excel spreadsheet like this only works if you're on Windows and you have Excel installed. But you can use the extensions to make CSV files or other file formats, so you don't have to use Excel like I'm doing here. You can export to a comma separated values file, which is a CSV, and import that into something like Google Sheets or use some other spreadsheet. On a Mac, you'll have to do the similar thing. Even if you have Excel, you'll have to first make a CSV file and then import that into the Mac version of Excel. Let me give you a quick tour of what this spreadsheet that was automatically generated looks like. You can see there's a little bit of header information here, the name of the project, the date we made it. And then there's two sections here. There's the timbers and the scantlings. Let me resize this just a little bit so we can see more of what we have. This top section here are the timbers, and the second section of the scantlings. The difference is that timbers there's only one of each, and in scantlings you've got multiples of them. And the way that's controlled, which timber gets put into which of those categories, depends on if you have named the component instance or you're just relying on the component definition name. We'll get into that in more detail in just a little bit. You can see some of the columns here. We've got the width and depth of the timber, of course. Its length in feet, that's rounded up to a 2-foot interval, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we can control that. The actual length of the timber, rounded up to the nearest inch, how many board feet, and the DOD, or degree of difficulty, which we're going to talk about later also. We can see that there's a total of 27 principal timbers here and this many board feet. And then down in the scantling section, we've got an extra column for the quantity, which tells how many of each of these smaller timbers we're going to need. There's a second page here too. This was the details page, and then we can go to the tally page. And this is what you would use for placing an order. We've combined all 10 by 12s, for example, into a single row. So they're all the 10 by 10s that were 20 feet long. They're all in a single row. So it's combined them to make it convenient for ordering. And we also have this section over here which can help you order extra material. So a lot of times you want to order some spare material just because the mill is a long ways away, and if you had to order just one, the shipping would kill you. So this spreadsheet can help you figure out how many extra timbers that you want to order. What I'd like to look at next is some of the configuration options that control how the timber list is generated. So I'm going to go back to SketchUp here. And if we go to Extensions, Timber Framing, and Configure, we can see the config options, and several of these are specifically for the timber list. Right here, this one, round up dimensions on timber list. What that means is if perhaps you're doing a mill rule frame and you've ordered 8 by 8s, but they're going to come to you as 7.5 by 7.5, and that's how you're going to draw them on your SketchUp model. But you want that to appear as an 8 by 8 on your timber list. So that just means if it's a fractional inch, go ahead and round it up to the nearest whole inch. English or metric can be used to say if you want your timber list to show things in inches and feet or in centimeters. Now, I added this several years ago for one client that requested it. It's largely untested. I wouldn't rely on that. You've been warned. The file format we touched on briefly. Right now I've got it set to make a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. You can also have it export to just simple text, or more often you'll use a CSV or comma separated value that you can use to import into any kind of spreadsheet, Google Sheets or Excel or some other spreadsheet if you're running on the Mac. This parameter here, minimum extra timber length, is something I was alluding to earlier. We're going to round up the length of the timber to the nearest 2-foot interval, 2-foot increment, because that's what you usually order from a sawmill. But sometimes you want more than just to the next 2-foot interval. For example, if your timber came out with the tenant to be 11 feet, 11 inches, you probably don't want a 12-foot timber. There's just not enough leeway when you're doing layout to avoid knots and things. So you're probably going to want to go with a 14-foot timber in that case. So what this parameter does is guarantee you're going to get at least this many extra inches when it rounds up to the nearest 2-foot interval. I'm just going to close this window now and just go back to the spreadsheet briefly. Remember that there was a column here in the details page called DOD, degree of difficulty. And that's something we haven't talked about in this series yet. So let me go back to the Sketchup model and tell you a little bit about what that's for. It's used for project estimating. So you can assign a DOD, or a degree of difficulty, to each piece in your frame. And these are arbitrary units. Maybe you want to call that days or hours that you think that it would take to complete this timber. Don't forget to include things like sanding, varnishing, material handling, of course. But to use the DOD, you can simply right-click on a timber and set DOD. So maybe I think this timber would take one person a whole day. We'll call that 8 hours. But this girt's a little simpler, and I'll set the DOD on that to be 6 hours. So you can go through the frame like that. And if you save these timbers to your library, your component library, the DOD will get saved with it. So as you build up your library with the DODs included, you won't have to go through your whole model every time, especially if you're taking things out of your library. Now here under timber framing, I can ask for the DOD report, and it's going to tell me that so far my total DOD is 56. That would be, in my case, or the way I was doing it, 56 man hours. But it's also telling me that 76 out of the 84 timbers don't have a DOD yet, so I probably have more work to do. Then it gives me a list of a few of what those are. So I can go and find them and attach the degree of difficulty, or DOD, to those. I'm just going to close the timber list here and rebuild it. See it auto-populating again. And this time we can see that the DOD has been filled in on several of these timbers, these and these, and that the total is going to show up here. So this will all cascade through to your timber list, and then you can use that for project estimating. The next feature I want to show you is called Tally by Tag. Let me use a different model for this one. And go to extensions, the configuration, and turn on this Tally by Tag feature. And you can see that this model's got something a little different going on. There's some steel straps on it. We did it on this model just to reduce complexity and to avoid the tenant collisions, because both the girts and the tie beams are coming in at the same height. Yes, there's lots of ways to solve that, but that's how we did it on this frame. So I've got the steel going on. One other thing I've got going on is that the engineer specified that certain timbers in this frame had to grade out at number 1 instead of just the normal number 2. So we have to take that into account when we're placing our order. And the best place to do that, of course, is in the timber list. So let me go ahead and generate the list. But this time we've got that Tally by Tag feature turned on. And now if you notice, but we got our regular detailed page, the same tally page that we had before, but now we've got this third page, Tally by Tag. And what's happened here is that we've broken out the tally into 3 different sections, or 4 different sections even. These timbers are grade number 2. These timbers here are grade number 1. We broke out the hardwoods. These are the splines. And then also the hardware, that ended up on its in its own layer, so we can keep track of that as well. And that, of course, are those metal straps, the Simpson straps. So this can be useful for further refining your material list. Now before we leave here, I'm going to close this timber list. I'm not going to save it. I just want to show you something that can go wrong when you're generating your material list here. You can look at the entity info window up here, and you can see that this is typing for A to B, and this one's for B to C. But if they should accidentally get the same name, I'm going to go A to B, just like this one is. And now when I try to generate the timber list, I'm going to get a warning message that I've got a duplicate timber. And it's saying that things are going to be messed up in the timber list. First of all, you're only going to get one entry for that, and we don't know which is the right one. You're going to get the wrong dimensions perhaps. So if you get this warning, you got to go in and find it and fix it. Let me just close this model and let's go back to that one we were working with before. Don't need to save those changes. And this time I'll show you how to use a CSV instead of going straight to Excel. So under Extensions, Timber Framing, Configure, let's change the file format, timber list file format to CSV. And now we're going to say Extensions, Timber Framing, Generate a Timber List. It's going to ask me where I want it. I'll just put it in this project file, and we'll save it and let it do its thing. Well, I guess I've still got the old Excel spreadsheet running. I don't need that anymore. And let's go to that project file. And down here at the bottom, we can see we've got a timber list. The file format is comma separated. So I could open this with just like any text editor, and we can just see it's just a text file where all the values are kind of comma separated, but you usually don't use it in this format. You usually will import it into some other program, and we'll do that with Google Sheets. So we just close this window and bring up Google Drive in my web browser, find that CSV file, here it is, and I'm just going to open it with Google Sheets. Now, a lot of the formatting that we get in Excel, we don't get when we export to CSV. For example, we probably want to just dial back the number of decimal places here on this column, and all the columns are the same width. Maybe we want to justify some of these headers, for example, but all the data is still there, and these formulas still work. CSV does let you export formulas, so if we were to, if we changed any of these lengths, the board feet formulas would still propagate through properly. And then you can see that we've got the tally section. We're not in separate tabs like we were in Excel. So it's not quite as polished as an Excel, direct to Excel export, but all the data is still here. So let me go back to the model and let's look at that. Let's go back to using Excel. And generate the Excel timber list again. And I just want to reiterate the point about what things end up in the timber section and what things end up in the Scantling section. Here in my model, you can see from the entity info window that this timber, this post 3A, has a name. I've named the instance. There is also a definition name, but that's not being used. The instance name overrides it. And the fact that it has an instance name, we're implying that it's a one of a kind. There's only one post 3A, and that belongs in the timber section. But if we were to take a look at this rafter, it doesn't have an instance name. It just has a definition. It's just called common rafter. So that means it's going to go in the Scantling section. So if we come over here, we can see here's post 3A, that ended up in the timbers, but the common rafter ended up down here in the Scantling section. Let's take a closer look at this tally section again and how you can use that to order spare material. So this section over here, the needed section, this is the exact number of timbers that you need for your project coming out of the Sketchup model. This figure here, this 10%, says that let's target 10% for the amount of spare material we have. And we can adjust that. I can bump that up to 15%, say. But what that does is it populates this column here, the suggested number of spares that you should order for each of these sizes. And then this column here is the number that you can change to what you're actually going to use when you place your order. This column here gets multiplied out by all of these things here and ends up in the board feet total. So we needed 6 10 by 12s, 20-foot 10 by 12s. We're asking for 1 spare, which means that we'll get 7 10 by 12s. So we've got that 1 spare that we'll need. In my mind, a good practice is to have at least 1 spare of each type of timber, so 10 by 10 in this case. I need 3 20-footers. The 15% formula didn't kick that up to add 1, but I'm going to manually add 1. And that means I'm going to get 4 10 by 10s by 20s. But that 20-foot 10 by 10 can also serve as the spare for the 16s and the 14s. So maybe I'm going to look at this one and say, I don't need a spare here. Let me just save that, my spare budget for later. 8 by 10s, I'm going to need at least 1 spare of that, so I'm going to change that to 1. 8 by 8s, I got quite a few of these. So I'm definitely going to want more than just 1 spare. But I'll need 1 at the 18-footer, 1 extra 12-footer, and 1 extra 10-footer. I think that'll do it. So then you can just kind of work your way down the timber list and look at that. One thing to pay special attention to is, in my case, the shorter pieces, the knee braces. So mine are cut in this frame. They're cut from 4x8 stock. That's so that I've got enough space to do the curve that I wanted to put in there. Let me just pull one of these out of the frame for a second, and let's get an actual measurement of the length that we need. You can see that it's just over 4 feet. But because of the way the software rounds up, it's going to order a 6-footer for that. And that might be excessive. Just by percentage, you can see that's a lot of extra material. So what I would typically do is take the number of 4x8s here, 24, and instead of getting 1 out of each 6-foot, let's take 12 pieces out of a 10-foot. So this would be 10, and this would be a 10-foot. That way, I've got about 5 feet to work with for each knee brace, and that can really cut down on the amount of material that you order. The software is not smart enough to figure that out. And that's all we have today from Ten and Tech. I hope you found this useful. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and we'll see you next time. Take care.